And what's also really interesting is that the enabling and strengthening UK R&D is going to be mainly incorporated in the curiosity-driven research as well. So that's a good vote of confidence, I think, for curiosity-driven researchers.
I think there's a lot of change, though, isn't there? I mean, I was at an EPSRC meeting this week. We were looking into the way that the investments were changing, and there was lots of questions, as you'd expect, from the people on that committee. Sort of, what's actually happening? What's going to change? And there's still, there's that slightly worried look that goes across your program directors' faces. They're realizing you're asking for details, and I think a lot of it is up in the air. I'm really excited by the enabling R&D budget, though, because I think a lot of that is targeted towards skills, and that's something I'm really interested in, and something that we're promoting through the Hidden Ref with hidden roles and all of the skilled people that are in those positions. So I'm really interested to see what happens there. Welcome to What the Ref, our attempt at demystifying everyone's favourite national research assessment exercise. I'm Simon.
I'm Ola.
And I'm James.
So what's up first? What news? What's changed with the Ref?
Well, I guess the main news is there's now an interim director for the Ref, Helena Mills. I'm guessing that will sort of unlock a few months where things haven't been changing too much. I mean, universities don't like there being too many periodic changes, but there's still a few things left to resolve in terms of the guidelines for the Ref. So new interim director, I guess, means we'll kick on and find more out the next few months about finalising what's going to happen for 2029.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be really exciting to see who's going to take that position on board, of course. All of the news that I've seen around it of saying basically they're looking for the right person now. No open adverts, though, I must point out, so they must have people in mind. Actually, news has been quite quiet. I don't know if you two have seen anything, but I had a look on the Ref website under news, and there were two items. One of them was we don't have a Ref director anymore, and the next one was we have an interim director. Anybody seen anything else?
No. I guess the main thing at this stage, really, Simon, is that like a lot of those things that we were talking about before Christmas are now filtering through into departments, schools, faculties, etc., as news. And you're starting to see briefings, as most universities are coming up to things like benchmarking exercises and stuff. They'll be sort of thinking, okay, let's tell people what's new, because they didn't need to tell people 3 months ago, right? But now's the time.
So maybe no news is good news in that case. It's business as normal. We're just getting everything into position, and things are progressing as you would hope. What about in other news? There's some stuff, some clarifications around UKRI funding and the way that it matters to us. Obviously, is that it entails the QR funding, which is obviously decided by the Ref. Anybody?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the main thing here is that there have been some chat over the last few months about different parts of the UKRI funding situation, and I don't think we're going to get into the details of that, but there was a sense of kind of some back and forth, in a sense that people didn't feel like they really understood the new funding settlement. And the thing I found most interesting is that UKRI put out a Sankey diagram. Some of you will imagine in your head what that is, and some of you go, what is a Sankey diagram? But they put out a Sankey which kind of tried to show, well, this is the funding that it was before the current settlement. This is what the funding is going to be in the future settlement. These are the buckets. We keep hearing about the infamous buckets. And in particular, showing where the curiosity-driven research funding is actually coming from under the new settlement, and just how much of it is QR, which I think is, in that visual kind of representation, is really, really interesting. I have the Sankey just over there behind me, just so you know.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
and what's also really interesting is that the enabling and strengthening UK R&D is going to be mainly incorporated in the curiosity-driven research as well. So that's a good vote of confidence, I think, for curiosity-driven researchers.
I think there's a lot of change, though, isn't there? I mean, I was at an EPSRC meeting this week. We were looking into the way that the investments were changing, and there was lots of questions, as you'd expect, from the people on that committee. Sort of, what's actually happening? What's going to change? And there's still, there's that slightly worried look that goes across your program directors' faces. They're realizing you're asking for details, and I think a lot of it is up in the air. I'm really excited by the enabling R&D budget, though, because I think a lot of that is targeted towards skills, and that's something I'm really interested in, and something that we're promoting through the Hidden Ref with hidden roles and all of the skilled people that are in those positions. So I'm really interested to see what happens there. So yeah, so not a huge amount of news. So whilst looking around for other things that to read about, I found a really interesting article in Wonky, and it was from Alice Wilson at Manchester Met, and it was called "Joy: Invisible to Metrics but Vital to Universities." I thought that was a really interesting article to write because, I mean, with all of the things that are going on in the sector at the moment, all of the things that are going on in the wider world, it's very easy to get caught up in everything being quite down, dark, and depressing. And this article saying actually, joy is a vital part of the work we do, and is key to creating a working environment in which people want to work in. And I must admit myself, I was thinking, I've always said that academia draws two types of people, those who are drawn through the joy of discovery and those who are drawn in through the joy of argument. I kind of feel that maybe that's something that we are missing in the current environment. So it was really interesting to read about that and have that positive message. But James, I think you know a little bit about the research team.
Yeah, that actually was a really interesting one because you pointed this out as like something you found, and I was like, wait a minute, that's related to some work that goes on in my group. So yeah, Alice is part of a team worked on an ESRC funded Queer Joy as Digital Good project, which unsurprisingly was thinking about the digital world, the extent to which it is quite hate filled, and the way in which things like queer joy might feed into better systems, better working practices, better communities in those spaces. I won't speak for the research, but certainly was a piece that when it came out really kind of touched us as a group, because there's some really lovely anecdotes in there about the ways in which, speaking among student communities about certain positionalities of individuals in a research team can bring real joy when they kind of see that the research you're doing kind of reflects their individual lives and makes them think about different careers that they might have. And, I guess there's also part of this that makes me think that we try to bring a little bit of joy to the ref, right, as well. And that, there's one of the reasons why Hidden Ref operates the way it does is that the ref system can seem slightly joyless. For good reasons, but that we bring a little bit of that not just through this podcast but through the wider work we do in Hidden Ref.
But it also links to this movement of slow professorship. I don't know if you've heard about that one. So the finding joy again in academia, in doing your research, taking things a little bit slowly and more mindfully, and allowing yourself a little bit of headspace to think of new ways of doing research and experimenting with things. And I think with the research culture that some disciplines are already suffering from, this can be particularly difficult. And we touched upon that a few weeks ago on another podcast about the University of Liverpool Business School and the report that the UCU released there and the pressure that these folks are facing around publishing in particular journals. So it's really nice to see that there is a movement still, and it sounds like quite a grassroots movement, James, picking up on the ideas of joy, on slow professorship, and also linking it to equality, diversity, and inclusion, and using that theory of joy to sort of replace and maybe to an extent disrupt the idea of just doing EDI, because of equal opportunities or policies and legislation, but doing things just for joy. And it's as simple as that.
I'm a bit worried about calling it slow professorship because it gives it kind of hierarchy, but I like the idea of slow research. So you're meaning as in like the slow food movement. It's like the slow research movement.
That's where it comes from. And I think the reason why it's called slow professorship is because it comes from the United States, where I think it's just like a blanket word for everyone who is an academic. Doesn't necessarily define your hierarchy or your place in it.
But
I like slow research.
Yeah, I like so. So that's why I came into this area. I thought there would be, there'd be time to sit and mull things over, contemplate. I'll get back with you with the answer to that in a couple of months after I've thought about it properly. But that's very much not what the modern academic environment is like. So yeah, I could get on board with that very much. So aside from our wanting to slow things down, we've also been out and about and talking. Ola, you went and did a talk Where was it?
So that was the British Academy Early Career Researcher Network, and was one of the regional branches, and was just to talk about what we're doing, the hidden ref and ETI and the initiatives around NTOs and the hidden roles. And it was very enjoyable, actually. And what I liked is that they were not shy to challenge me and challenge, what we're doing, because they are early career folk. They are very concerned about their career prospects if they do pivot away from traditional outputs, which is, articles, books, and book chapters. For some of them, even books are not really viable. If you look at business and management, for instance, so they really questioned, to what extent can they really stand behind this initiative and build this, cultural change, if they are at the same time possibly jeopardizing their own career prospects and the production of research that they really expected, within their disciplines and faculties. Any good ideas, James?
I mean, what's really interesting about this is it comes back to that classic conversation of who should bear the risk. So, should it be early career colleagues who bear the risk of this? Now, some early career colleagues who choose to jump at this might actually find some career advantages and others won't. It reminds me of similar things around open access kind of 10, 15 years ago. Who is going to bear the risk of their scholarship being more open and, in some disciplines being more susceptible to people poaching stuff, but would that have kind of benefits for their career?
So I completely agree on that front. And sometimes you sort of think, certainly I overlook quite how much we're asking people to take on board. And we're basically saying, tell you what, rather than following hundreds of years of history and what's happened in your departments and in your subject area, we're saying, give this a shot and it might work out. And that is a big ask for somebody who's starting off their career and wants to make sure that they're creating a good foundation in academia. But I don't know. I think we're seeing it change, and I think you can combine both that sort of traditional approach with at least an eye on some of the more sort of less traditional, not traditionally submitted outputs approach to your work.
I think one of the things about the sort of hundreds of years of tradition thing is also the extent to which puncturing that myth is also very important. So that's a big part of what's been going on in the kind of the publishing world at the moment, which is sort of saying, well, we've created an architecture that seems like it's been around forever in exactly this form, but actually it's not. The journal article today is not the journal article that it was 50 years ago. It doesn't have the same motivations into its production. And also we exist in very different conditions through which those articles are produced. So it's that classic. If you design the system from scratch now, would everyone create journal articles? Probably not. In the same way we said, if you designed how you organize cultural heritage today, would you have museums? You wouldn't have them in their current form. So we're always inheriting these architectures, which are, legacy ways of working, which we have to work around. And I think what Hidden Ref is trying to do is to say, well, what aspects of what we do now are inefficient, poor, don't work for us, and could we do differently? And then who should take the risk? And I'm really glad you went to an ECR network, Ola, and had these conversations, because I think it's really important we get challenged by those people, because that speaks to me and says we need to be challenging senior people to change and them start the change, which then other people can follow later, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I remember when I was doing my PhD, I had a conversation with a professor about, breaking boundaries or doing something really left wing or using alternative methods or methodologies, really breaking the mold. And the conversation was that basically, unless you are a professor yourself and you show the mastery and you've proved your credibility and legitimacy of your area, you can't really experiment because you're not seen as someone who knows the basics, the traditions, to then take it on to the next level. And I think this is what really is at the core here. So if you are already established, it's okay for you to take risks because this is just fun for you. This is the joy. But when you're starting, the risk is substantially larger. So my advice would be do not abandon traditional outputs. That would be a completely irresponsible piece of advice to give. But if there is something that you think lends itself much better, a piece of research that it would be much better served with a different type of output, don't be scared to experiment and speak to your research officer or research support on how you can deliver that and how you can make the best out of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the right advice. And I think what's really interesting is like this conversation first about joy and then about thinking about this, the responses you got from this early career network is reminding me of something else that happened over the last few months. Actually, it happened before Christmas, which was a piece in Nature that got picked up quite a lot by Laura Raffington, which was about basically saying academia is just a job. And the other side of this whole, work we're doing around NTOs is for some people, they want to go to work, they want to do their work, they want to enjoy it, and they want to go home and not have to think about their work too much. And I think that, we should be accommodating that undoubtedly within how academia functions. And to be asking people to be advocate for something a bit different might mean that they're thinking, oh, okay, that just adds another thing to my kind of daily work. Now, they may also agree, those individuals, that the current system of publishing is broken and there's all sorts of reasons why we need to unpick the ways in which assessment works through things like the ref. But they also might be thinking, can you just give me a slightly quieter life? It's just a job. It's not my evenings and weekends. I don't want to keep me up all night.
God, that's amazing. I'd love to think of it as just a job rather than like a commitment and a lifestyle. But absolutely. How prevalent do you think that attitude is? Because I look at the people around me, and a lot of people aren't treating it like a job. A lot of them are treating it like it's the most important part of their lives. Is it the same for you?
Well, I think that piece in Nature, that what it was trying to argue is that if you can at least try and implement that kind of working in a group and make that slightly more normalized and slightly more of an expectation, even though some people will find that tricky, and maybe going back to your point earlier, Simon, got into the whole thing because it felt like a commitment and something they really wanted to do. But if you can implement that within a research group and a culture, what you probably going to get are better well-being outcomes more broadly. And we know that one of the many crises in the university sector at the moment is the extent to which, stress becoming something that really impacts upon people's physical health. And I will leave our listeners to go and find online some of the comments that this piece provoked from the kind of unsurprisingly sort of usual suspects potentially who think this is all sorts of woke nonsense, that people would just go to university just to do a job. But I think it's important to note that, I think these are aspirations we should be, if you think about the ref, you think about the spree, you think about all those statements, those things are not turning around saying our academics work really hard evenings and weekends and are burning themselves out. They're creating a picture of an organization where people are balancing their research and balancing that against their wider kind of, well-being, right? And I think we should be pushing towards that direction whereby people see their job as something that they can do and be well, rather than something they can do and feel unwell. And that doesn't seem an unreasonable expectation of our profession or how we're assessed.
Well, there are definitely parallels with a public sector motivation and how, the society expects teachers, nurses, doctors just to do the job because they're internally, intrinsically motivated to do so. They don't need any other external motivators there. So, and I think that linking it to well-being and mental health and drawing healthy boundaries between life and work is absolutely crucial. And the system at the moment is very, very challenging for some disciplines. And like we've seen various reports on what it does to people and their careers.
And with that effect on you, then there's fewer people to do the work to go around, and the workloads just pile up and pile up. So whilst we're talking about how we achieve a good work-life balance, should we move on to talk about how on earth we're going to service all of the NTO workshop requests that have come in, and how we're going to get around that? I think that's a decent segue, I feel. So I thought it'd be really interesting to chat with you both about the not traditionally submitted output workshops that we're running. We originally said that we would run 15 in the bid over the sort of 5 years that we're running this project. We did 8 last year. We've got 4 in already this year, and they keep coming in every day. So there's obviously a huge amount of sort of interest in getting us to come to universities and train people on how to assess not traditionally submitted outputs, NTOs. So we've done a lot of evolution of the way that we've been running these. We started running them at the start of 2025, and I thought it might be interesting to talk through some of those changes and the areas that we're working on. So the first one, so Ola, you're going to be off to, where are you next week?
London. An undisclosed location in London, shall we say.
Oh, I didn't know it was a secret. So it's University of London, isn't it? So it's a federation.
Yes.
Federation of universities. Yeah. And we've taken on board the feedback from the last NTO workshops that we were running last year, based around this idea that basically we can't just go into universities and teach people how to assess not NTOs because the guidance doesn't exist. We're having to create that guidance at the same time as running the workshops, but we can't do that sequentially as you would hope to because we're trying to do this in a very compressed timeline whilst the ref is running. So people need help now. And our plan for that has always been, well, we'll kind of use different ways of introducing people to NTOs, and we'll use their input to help build the guidance. So Ola, I don't know if you wanted to talk a bit about some of the stuff that came out of your Talk Aloud experiment and the way that that's been feeding into the workshops.
So I joined ETI and the Hidden Ref last year. So after you've already delivered some of those NTO workshops. And one of the ways in which we've evolved them, let's say, is to actually present people with some NTOs that are real, so curated from the Ref21 website, and ask people to evaluate them, according to the Ref. The little, not as much guidance as we have, but at least using the Ref criteria to look at them. So significance, originality, and rigor, and use the current Ref ratings. And it was very interesting to see, one, how people grapple with evaluating these NTOs. The difference in between the NTOs and the standard of the descriptions of whether there are working URL links supplied with the submission, and the extent to which the submitting institution articulates the research process in the submission. And I think that the kind of learning point from it is that there's not a lot of standardization, and people are sensitized to the need of making the guidelines much more informative, structured, and useful.
I mean, I should add here that I haven't done one of these NTO workshops, and I think it's important for our listeners to know that we're not only doing NTO workshops London and southwards. The one I'm doing is going to be York. So there you go. We're going a bit further afield, and I think it's going to be one down in the southwest quite soon as well. But I'm right in saying, Ola and Simon, that like people find this hard, right? Like the instinctive reaction is not necessarily that getting stuck into thinking about the criteria in relation to the type of output and just organically trying to make it work. The first thing is they just go, "Wow, this is hard. This doesn't work," right?
But it's quite interesting. So the ones we've run, so as I say, we've run 8, and you're right, they're all around the country, and the ones that are coming up are all around the country as well. And you do that thing where you stand up and you've given them the NTOs for them to review, and you've told them about originality and rigor and significance, and you say, right, so there isn't really any guidance yet for how you apply these to these actual examples. We're just going to get you to talk through it. And then quite often at the end of it, I've had people saying, and literally in these words, it was a lot easier than I thought. And I think the problem is when you try to kind of like think, well, how would I write that guidance? How would I specifically say that the significance of this, patent application is going to be measured against other patent applications? It feels quite difficult. But when you're sitting down and looking through the text, you're using like the heuristics that we've all been talking a lot about. You're building up an evidence base because you're actually dealing with the with that data at that time. If you're having to do it blind, it's very difficult. But if you've got the NTOs in front of you and you're reading through, people find it actually not that difficult.
So take it that I'm wrong then, and that it's not hard. So, like, why are the reasons you think people are asking? But why do you think people are asking these workshops then? Because if so, okay, let's say there's a variety of people, and some people do think it's relatively straightforward, and some think it's hard. Like, why do you think people actually want them? If in some cases the guidance is, because if you look at what the actual wording is of around originality, significance, and rigor, right? Like, it's quite vague anyway. And none of it is genuinely specific to things like books and articles. Like, it's not. It's very vague. So why is it you think people want these workshops? Is it because there's a plurality of kind of understandings of how you apply it?
I'm always going, I think you should go first, but I've definitely got an answer to that question.
I just want to say that I didn't hear that it was easy. So after our Birmingham Festival workshop, the stuff that we collected from the participants, they're definitely grappling with applying the REF criteria onto the NTOs, and they felt they weren't necessarily adequate or suitable for that. So, Simon, maybe you had a few people who really felt, it was easy, but I'm not sure if that's the general trend. Or
maybe I've over-egged that a little bit, but people were saying basically it wasn't as hard as they thought it would be. And I think what you'll find is if you get them to apply the same criteria to journal outputs that they understand very well, they're finding the same difficulties. You're making a lot of very subjective calls, and basically the only reason it's easier for journals is they know them better. But the thing that I found, the reason that we're being asked to come up and do the workshops, is basically there just isn't anything to help people. So you'd have to put together that entire workshop framework and all the documentation and all that sort of stuff yourself to even attempt to understand how to assess NTOs. So they want us to come because they know we've already got it and we can give them that experience so then they can work out for themselves whether they think it's going to be easy or not. But James.
So essentially we're growing our sample size, right? So we're going out to different places, talking to different people. Some of our invitations are coming directly from central parts of universities. Some are coming from individual units, for example. Some are coming from very small organizations that are kind of sister organizations to kind of bigger pieces. So we're growing our sample size. We're understanding what people need. And last episode was about the festival. And these things are interrelated, right? These are the guidance we're generating here through the workshops and other bits we're doing are also feeding into the festival, right?
Yeah. And the expert groups as well, of course. So we have, in a perfect world, this is all going to be a wonderful virtuous cycle where we have expert groups writing guidance, which is applied in NTO workshops and then refined because we're actually, it's being used by people in real life. And then that feeds into the competition, which will then be like the proper use of that guidance to assess the NTOs that are submitted to us. And then we share all at the festival. And everybody benefits. Everybody knows how to evaluate NTOs. They all agree with me that it's actually quite easy. And then we see them submitting significantly more NTOs to the coming REF.
I just wanted to share the shock that I experienced the other day because I'm now preparing different NTOs for different panels. So our participants can choose which table they want to sit at, panel A, B, C, or D. And when I was looking for panel A NTOs, I discovered, guess how many to choose from?
I don't need to
from
guess.
Ref 21. Five. Including one duplicate. So effectively 4 for panel A. And this is everything that is not text-based. So there we go.
So I was putting together some slides. As I say, so we've had this evolution of the NTO workshop again. We've gone from the first ones, the trial, the pilot ones, where we were using actual submissions that come into the hidden ref, but they weren't written in the right way. So we used 20, when we are still using 2021 actual submissions in NTO categories, but to try and keep things simple, we gave everybody the same ones. And then there was feedback that actually we'd like to be able to apply our disciplinary knowledge. So Ola has been off looking for NTOs that fall within, and we can't do it by unit of assessment, so we're doing it by main panel. So at least you've got that slight affiliation. And I thought, well, let's plot them by main panel and see what we've got. And I actually, when I looked through, and it's in the, we can share the link for this. There's 74 NTOs on panel A, 32 on panel B, 435 on panel C, and a stonking 3,564 for panel D. So there's a significant amount of difference across those 4 panels.
Yeah, and we've always said that we think that, people in subjects that come under panel D can teach the rest of the university system about some of the ways this evaluation can happen. I mean, the other thing we should say at this point as well is that we're trying to also understand. So one of the things we've started to realize, I should be really clear on this, started to realize is the value of the portfolio in the system. So I think, some of us kind of knew this and some of us didn't, I think, as we were sort of spinning up this project and starting to get involved with more organizations that wanted NTO workshops. But the way in which the portfolio works is this kind of space in which to put a combination of things that may be a little bit of, written work, maybe a journal article, maybe a chapter, combined with some creative practice, combined with some other category of output that may also fall under an NTO. And that those portfolios have sort of become a space to sort of spend more time explaining the connections between things. And so actually there's a lot in panel D, but there's potentially also a lot sort of hidden and subsumed within those kind of portfolio spaces as well. And I don't think it's the job of the hidden ref to say people shouldn't do portfolios, because they're a key part of particularly creative practice institutions' submissions to the ref. But I think it is part of our job to say, part of our job to understand, are people using portfolios because they lack confidence in submitting just the composition, or they lack confidence in submitting just the data set, for example, and feel more confident packaging it up as part of a portfolio.
But there are some challenges in relation to portfolios in that they require a lot of expertise and resources in itself to put that together in an effective way. So, and not all institutions, have that budget to put that together. So, this is potentially challenging, and again, in a way, not very inclusive of everybody and every institution out there.
So the message here is that there's workshops. We're doing lots of them. We're going out there. We're finding out information from people. We're going to learn more. We're going to train people, /teach people, /try to get people engaged with the idea of assessing non-traditional outputs. And what's going to come out of that, Simon, is a whole bunch of evidence, but hopefully a bunch of institutions as well who might be able to start disseminating that information among themselves, almost to the point where we might get people like who are on train the trainer style models, right?
Absolutely. So that is the sustainable way of keeping these workshops going and dealing with the demand for them. And it is part of our plan is to train the trainers. So people go off and they will provide these workshops themselves, maybe within their own universities. I would love it if we could see people starting to work across universities and, maybe having regional get-togethers. But we'll see how that goes, and we'll see what the appetite's like for it. One of the big things I think will be very interesting, however, would be if we were to talk to, say, a couple of ref institutional directors and to find out how this is affecting their work. Unfortunately, we've got 2 of them booked in, and they're going to be, I think, on the next podcast. So we can ask some questions to them directly about things like how they're putting portfolios together, how they're training their staff, their experience of how people are reacting to the messaging around NTOs as well. I think it's going to be really interesting. So that should be in the next podcast.
And in the meantime, keep asking us to host NTO workshops with you, but expect that it might take us a little while to organize it. We've got a backlog.
There are work-life balance in mind.
Don't worry about a work-life balance. We'll find a model that works, because we
only joking.
We've got to get these workshops going. So
we love all the requests.
I think it's just one of the key things that we can do to really make NTOs far more acceptable for the coming ref.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Thanks, Ola. And thank you for listening. You can catch What the Ref wherever you get your podcasts, things like Acast, and also on YouTube. If you have ideas that you want us to discuss, email us at wtref@hidden-ref.org. And remember to catch up on what we do on our socials. Particularly, I think we're particularly active these days on LinkedIn. Join us next time for another episode of What the Ref.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.